welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Seltner in our Washington, D.C. studio. It is truly good to have you here with us. And this week is a special edition of the program where we look back at some of the most inspiring pro-life stories and most helpful expert analysis of top pro-life concerns. Stay tuned throughout EWTN Pro-Life Weekly to hear about Jackson Buell, the boy who was born missing 80% of his brain and is defying doctors' predictions. We introduce you to the pregnant Christian teenager who was banned from walking at her high school graduation, and hear why the founder of a major pro-abortion group converted to the pro-life cause. That's all coming up, but first, we want to remind you there's always a way to be involved in the pro-life movement. Even if you're not a congressman crafting legislation on Capitol Hill, you can make a difference. You can play a role in defending the unborn from any neighborhood at any age. Each week, we'll give you a specific call to action. This is a way for you to get involved. It will often be a specific petition you can sign or a way to directly share a message with an influential voice. If you want to find out the latest call to action, go to your computer or your smartphone to prolifeweekly.com. We will update the page each week to reflect the current direction of the pro-life movement with the most strategic action you can take. Be sure to save the website information and bookmark it in your internet browser. Once again, it's prolifeweekly.com. And if you're active on social media, you can like EWTN and the Susan B. Anthony list on Facebook and follow both groups on Twitter. If you do, you'll get the latest pro-life news and updates. At one point, Dr. Bernard Nathanson directed the world's largest abortion clinic. But before his death, he would become one of the most outspoken pro-life advocates. We now introduce you to one woman committed to spreading Dr. Nathanson's message about how he deceived America into accepting abortion.
Terry Beatley is a stay-at-home mother with a hunger for knowledge. The Virginia homeschooling parent took an interest in the abortion movement's history. The more she researched, the more Beatley felt called in prayer to meet with Dr. Bernard Nathanson. Nathanson presided over 60,000 abortions and co-founded NARAL, Pro-Choice America, before his conversion to the pro-life movement. To Beatley's surprise, the former abortionist agreed to an interview while dying of cancer.
At the end of the interview, I felt such compassion for him because he knew the culture of death he was leaving behind. And he knew he had been the preeminent physician who led the pro-abortion movement. And I said, Dr. Nathanson, if you have a message for America, I said, I know you're too sick to get it out. I said, but if you tell me what your message is, I promise I will commit the rest of my life to delivering your message across the country until it becomes common knowledge. He said, continue teaching the strategy, it's an 8-point propaganda strategy of how I deceived America, and then tell America that the co-founder of NARAL, Pro-Choice America, says to love one another. Abortion is not love. Stop the killing. The world needs more love, and I'm all about love now.
The propaganda point Nathanson called the most brilliant political strategy was the Catholic strategy, targeted towards American Catholic voters.
So what they had to do was intentionally separate the Catholics' religious doctrine from their legislative judgment, and they called it the Catholic straddle. And that straddle was to allow those conservative Catholics who were personally against abortion, but they would sell it like this: you can remain Mr. and Mrs. Catholic voter in New York, personally abhorrent to abortion, but it's okay to vote for a pro-choice candidate because it's just a personal decision between a woman and her doctor.
The lies of abortion all came crumbling down for Nathanson when, for the first time, he saw a baby in an ultrasound.
She, that little girl, was smiling. She's sucking her thumb. She's yawning. She's wiggling her toes. And the father of America's abortion industry, who founded NARAL, Pro-Choice America, who skidded the road for Roe v. Wade with propaganda, recognized the humanity of the baby in the womb.
Nathanson died in 2011, but Beatley hopes his message lives on in her new book, What If We've Been Wrong? It's the same question Nathanson posed to NARAL in his resignation, which came exactly 2 years after the Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision.
He's asking the chairman of the NARAL Pro-Choice America Board of Directors, what if we've been wrong? Question mark. What an incalculable injustice will have happened. He was trying to convince the NARAL Board of Directors we have now an ethical issue on our hand. We can no longer deny the humanity of that unborn baby.
Dr. Nathanson converted to Catholicism before his death, and Terry Beatley came back to the church during her pro-life research. It's a powerful conversion. Turning now to our next story, 18-year-old Maddie Runkles recently ignited a national conversation on how pro-lifers respond to Christian teen pregnancy. Banned from walking at her high school graduation, Maddie, a pregnant student, was still able to receive her diploma, and we were there when she did.
In recent weeks, Maddie Runkles could be found in the New York Times, Washington Post, and major network news shows. But on the first Saturday in June, Maddie could be found in a cap and gown at a Maryland Methodist church.
Let's welcome Maddie.
She's the only one receiving her diploma at this alternative high school graduation because she couldn't walk with her Heritage Academy peers the day before.
I want to thank every single person here, and there's more out there, but honestly, thank you to every single person in this room, because if it wasn't for you, I don't think I would have been able to make it through the past few months.
Maddie is pregnant, about 6 months along. It's a clear violation of the abstinence pledge she signed at her small Christian school. The 4.0 GPA student was suspended, stripped of her leadership positions, and banned from walking at graduation, a punishment other students who also broke the student pledge did not receive.
They delayed the discipline to all the way till graduation. I think it's also important that when we're talking about the issue, especially of premarital sex and then pregnancy resulting from that premarital sex, that the discipline is always administered for breaking that code of conduct, for breaking that vow of chastity, not for being pregnant. I think we need to be really careful with that.
Kristen Hawkins is president of Students for Life of America. Maddie approached the pro-life group with her story, and they encouraged her to share it on a national stage.
I realized that my story was bigger than myself, and I needed to use it for something greater than myself.
Students for Life and other pro-life groups have been rallying around Maddie to provide support both emotionally and financially.
So some of our supporters wanted to know what more they could do for today, and so they pulled together their resources, and we're presenting you the college scholarship for $16,000.
Based on the Guttmacher Institute, 30% of teen pregnancies end in abortion, and more than 50% of abortions are performed on women identifying as Catholic or Christian. Some see the school's decision to prolong Maddie's punishment as a way to shame her instead of applaud her decision for life. Heritage Academy Principal Dave Hobbs tells EWTN Pro-Life Weekly in a phone conversation, "Every student discipline situation is dealt with on an individual basis, on a case-by-case basis. To box discipline is not wise. The issue is not abortion. The root is abstinence. Here at the Academy, we felt we had to address the root of the problem. It is irrational for someone to say Heritage Academy did not let Maddie walk because she chose to keep her baby. Of course we're glad she kept her baby, and I pray for Maddie every day." The Catholic Church also teaches that sexual love between a man and woman is reserved for marriage, sparking a discussion on how to support the life of an unborn child without condoning premarital sex. Maddie and her family agree it's a balance.
We don't want to normalize the pregnancy. That's not what this is all about. What we want to do is we want to normalize the love that comes after those decisions are made.
No one celebrated me having sex before marriage. That is not in any way okay. It's not celebrated. No one is promoting that. But, mistakes happen. We're all human. Just because we're Christians and we signed a code of conduct doesn't mean that we're immune from making mistakes. So you just have to pick up, forgive the person, make sure that they are repentive of it. They have to be sorry for what they've done and realize that it was wrong. We just got to move on.
The Runkles family tells EWTN the child's father wants to be actively involved in the child's life, and marriage down the line is still a possibility. Maddie will name her son Grayson, a nod to God's grace, because despite the debate, Maddie has felt God's presence all along.
In the end, at the end of the day, Christ is all that we need, and He really is all that we have to get us through everything.
That's a story that continues to create much discussion. Threats to equality of human life have accelerated in recent years in our courts and in our hospitals. We introduce you now to a man who's been documenting and clearly speaking out on these threats for years. Wesley J. Smith is a lawyer, a bioethics expert in this next interview. Wesley J. Smith, thanks for taking the time to sit down with us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
You write and talk a lot about the culture of death in our world today. What do you mean by that?
That's a pretty big topic, but what in a real nutshell I think it means, and I believe it was coined by Pope John Paul II, but it means that as a society we are beginning to look at the intentional ending of human life as a means of solving problems. It could be assisted suicide, a means of solving the problem of human suffering. So we're getting to a place where eliminating suffering is becoming the purpose of society, and then that morphs very quickly into eliminating the sufferer. It may be a woman who has a pregnancy that is not wanted, and the solution is to terminate that pregnancy. And of course, it just moves into other areas as well. And the problem with it isn't only that people are losing their lives as a consequence, but we are losing the concept of human exceptionalism, the idea that being human being matters morally simply and merely because we are human. And that reduces the view of Western civilization, that we each have equal moral worth, that a human being's life is incalculable. And it is, I think, an attack on Western civilization, not intended to be, but it undermines Thomas Jefferson writing, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness."
You've also written what you call the slippery slope from assisted suicide, which you've mentioned, to legalized murder. For critics who say that's being dramatic, what's your response?
Well, it's facts on the ground. First off, when I went to law school, somebody could not consent to their murder. And euthanasia is allowing people to ask to be murdered because they are being lethally injected for reasons of the patient's desire to eliminate their own suffering, or because they're in despair, or what it might be. In some countries, like the Netherlands, you're having mentally ill people euthanized. Belgium not only euthanizes mentally ill people, but then conjoins it with organ harvesting if the patient approved it beforehand. I can't think of anything more dangerous to a society and to individuals who are despairing and suffering through the night than to say your deaths have greater value than your lives. One thing more dangerous if a society comes to believe it. In Belgium, you have even healthy elderly couples have received joint euthanasia in order to, because they wanted to avoid the future suffering of the grief of loss of a spouse.
Of loneliness.
That's right, the future fear of it. And in one case, the death doctor, as I call them, was procured by the couple's son, who said, well, this was the only choice we had because I would not have been able to care for them. So when you decide you're going to start killing the elderly, killing the disabled, killing the mentally ill, killing people with cancer, you're creating a disposable caste, a killable caste of people. And here in the United States, where we do not allow lethal injection euthanasia, but 5 states, or 6 states, when you include Washington, D.C., which is not technically a state, allow assisted suicide, where doctors are allowed to prescribe poison for patients to take if they have a terminal illness. You're saying, well, okay, if you want to kill yourself, and let's say you're doing it because your business had collapsed or your children had died, we're going to give you suicide prevention. Oh, I have cancer. Well, in that case, here are your pills. You're telling the cancer patient, you're telling the person who may be worried about being a burden, and this is why people are committing assisted suicide, not pain, existential fear. They're worried about being a burden. They're worried about not being able to engage in enjoyable activities, or they're worried about losing dignity. When you say, as a doctor or as a family member saying, yes, of course, Mom, that's your choice. When you say that, you are confirming those people's worst fears about themselves, that they are not as worthy of being loved, that their life isn't worth living, that they are a burden, and it is a form of abandonment, and it is to treat people unequally based on illness.
Finally, do you have any advice for our viewers on how they can best engage in the culture?
Participate in caring for people when they're an extremist. I've been a hospice volunteer. I can't tell you how important that was in my life, just to be with people and families who are going through this. We are a death-fearing culture. And for Catholics who watch EWTN, that it seems to me is not the way to go. Right. You should embrace the person suffering. You should embrace families in need. Catholics should never allow, dioceses should never allow anybody in their area to die alone. Reach out to people. Let them know they're important. Let them know they'll get the kind of care that they need. Make sure they're not isolated. And a lot of people will say, you know, I don't want those poison pills. Life is worth living to the very end.
Wesley J. Smith, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
When we come back,
the dialogue is the most important thing. We're not condemning women in unplanned pregnancies. We are here to support the preborn.
Actress Margaret Qualley tells us why she is passionately pro-life. Stay tuned as a special edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break.
I vote for life. For life. I vote for life. Because it's an abomination to God, the culture of death. An abomination to God, the culture of death. I cannot vote for death.
Strong and powerful words from our EWTN foundress, Mother Angelica, on why she voted only for pro-life candidates. We continue to remember Mother's soul in our prayers. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Seltner, and this is a special edition of the program as we look back at our most inspiring pro-life stories and helpful analysis from top experts. As we discuss these pro-life issues, we want to remind you there's always a way you can counter the culture of death. To find out what our call to action is each week, go to prolifeweekly.com. Make sure to save the website and share it with your fellow pro-life friends and neighbors. That's prolifeweekly.com. She's acted in films like Independence Day and television shows like Gossip Girl. But this actress is taking a stance that's not as mainstream. Margaret Qualley sat down with EWTN Pro-Life Weekly and explains why she is pro-life and not afraid to say it, inside or outside the studio. Margaret, you are an actress who has starred in soap operas, major television shows, major movies. How did you get involved in the pro-life movement?
I was always in the pro-life movement. My mother was very involved in the pro-life movement when we were kids. As soon as she heard about Roe versus Wade, she mobilized all of us. And that was the first time that they were political, my parents, in New York. So I come from a pro-life family.
How is that received by fellow actors and actresses? It's not very common someone from Hollywood comes out and says they are pro-life.
Well, I'm pretty much from the New York area, so it's film and television and also stage. So I've done a lot of stage work. And it isn't common, but it's a wonderful opportunity to talk about it. So people usually get to know me as an actor first, and then we enjoy each other's company and we enjoy the work. And then when it comes up in a sort of natural fashion, they're sometimes surprised, but we already have each other's respect, so there's an opportunity for dialogue.
Maybe more willingness to hear you out and listen to you in that regard.
That they're actually meeting one of those pro-lifers. And you know, I've been very, pro-woman and pro-child and very nonviolent. So there's actually kind of a lot of things for us to talk about.
Speaking of that, you are an honorary board member of the group Feminists for Nonviolent Choices. Yeah. Would you say it does go hand in hand, being a feminist and being pro-life?
Oh yeah. It was the early tenements of the American feminist movement to be pro-child. It was Elizabeth Cady Stanton and in the Revolution, and the other early American feminists were all pro-life. They never would consider separating a woman from the life of her child, ever. And woe to the man who puts that upon her, to quote Stanton. So now I just think the biggest need is for us to get the word out there that we are pro-woman and pro-child and non-violent. So whatever the reasons are for a woman to seek an abortion in the first place, let's get to those root causes. Let's make her feel safe and pursue her education and get her health care and get her job placement and help her take care of her baby.
Margaret, you were raised in a Catholic family.
Yeah.
Has your faith shaped how you view life? It sounds like your parents had a big impact on your pro-life views.
My mother and my father shaped everything about me, and then there's a very healthy period of rebellion where you decide what are the things that you are going to take on as an adult. And I just found with my life as an actor, the day is sometimes, doesn't have any shape. It goes from having a lot of shape. You have to be somewhere at 5 o'clock in the morning and then you work till, midnight, and then they give you 2 minutes off and $1,000 turnaround and you get up and do it again. To days and months of no activity, looking for auditions. So to this day, at this ripe old age, and from when I was a teenager facing days without structure, it was always mass in the gym. And I just find my faith is always reinforced. There's so much to learn. So many genius people, the Thomistic Institute, there's so many genius people who call Catholicism their home that I can't learn enough about it.
What would you say to young actors and actresses who might be hesitant to enter the industry if they're Catholic and they're pro-life and they're afraid that maybe their views wouldn't be respected? Would you have an encouraging word for them?
If you're afraid, don't go into this industry. If you're afraid, you're in the business of being rejected. That's what you do most often for a living as an actor. I don't hold it against the people who hire me, their political views, and I don't expect them to hold mine against me when they hire me. If I'm good for the job, I'm good for the job. I don't think the workplace is a place all the time for a political exchange. When it happens, you do it with respect. If you're pro-life, you should respect each other. So if you're afraid, don't go into the business. Do something else. And you are who you are. You're good enough. We are good enough. So if your views are that life begins at conception, then explore that and kick that around happily with people, whatever work you do for a living. Whatever you do for a living.
Margaret, it's a pleasure to speak with you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Very happy to be here.
Finally tonight, Brandon and Brittany Buell were told their son Jackson wouldn't make it full term. Then he wouldn't survive a few days, then a few weeks. But now, Jackson Buell is almost 3 years old. Meet the little boy who is defying all the odds, all because his family decided to say yes to life.
Hi, buddy.
You're just in a snuggling kind of mood this morning, aren't you?
I love you, buzz.
Like many young married couples, Brandon and Brittany Buell were excited to learn in late 2013 they were expecting a baby. It was a bundle of joy soon strained by troubling news. The Buells' 17-week ultrasound indicated their growing baby boy likely had spina bifida.
They painted a very negative picture. They transferred us to a high-risk clinic in Orlando, Florida, and we went through ultrasound after ultrasound, week after week.
We went twice a week, it seemed like, for some sort of ultrasound, some sort of testing, some sort of counseling. Even our genetic counselor, who was supposed to be neutral, steered us more towards an abortion or termination, as they called it. And even we denied it, and they scheduled it anyways, just in case we changed our minds.
But Brandon and Brittany didn't change their minds. And on August 27, 2014, Jackson Buell was born, missing roughly 80% of his brain.
Well, I remember laying there when I was getting my C-section, and he tried to prepare me for just even how small his head was. And even that first initial shock was like, okay, we're really in for something, because he was a lot smaller than I ever anticipated.
Jackson, as far as doctors can tell, is not in pain, but is severely disabled. He receives his nutrition from a tube and has frequent startle seizures.
It's okay. Hey,
right,
Mommy's right here. I got you. Did you fall asleep?
Misdiagnosis after misdiagnosis, The Buells finally learned their son's condition when he turned 1. Jackson has microhydranencephaly, which means there's spinal fluid where his brain's left and right hemispheres should be. Brandon and Brittany made a decision early on in their parenting. Instead of preparing for Jackson's death, they would focus on Jackson's life.
We want him to experience as much as possible, and it's really benefited him because he's really smart and strong and he's learning.
They document his strides in Facebook videos.
Bud. Mommy's proud of you. Look at you eating that cookie.
Jackson eating on his own.
Good job. Look at those big steps.
Jackson attempting to walk. The Buells even claim to hear their son say, "I love you," like in this moment, captured here.
I love you.
Jackson recently passed the 2.5-year mark, another achievement defying what the family's doctors predicted.
There's a great chance he will not survive, and then if he does survive, he'll probably never hear, probably never see, probably never walk, probably never talk, probably never know when he's hungry, basically not be able to do anything effectively. We still walked forward in our own faith saying it's not our choice.
The Buells want to help other families also living with a medical marvel, so they created the Jackson Strong Foundation to help raise awareness and funds for neurological research. And the Christian couple released a book chronicling lessons they've learned. It's titled, "Don't Blink."
This life is short. Happiness is fleeting. Nothing lasts forever. And it's enjoying the moment. It's seizing the day. It's carpe diem.
You mentioned that Jackson was here born for a purpose. What do you think that purpose is?
I think it comes down to hope. He's already touched so many more lives than I will ever be able to touch. And he's not even 3. We know better than anybody else there's a great chance we outlive our son. And although that'll be tough, if and when that day happens, it does not discount anything he's done. It does not take away any value he has. Value is not in how many days you're here, but it's truly to show that every single one of us has a unique story and what we can contribute to society.
I love you, Jackson.
It's incredible the difference one small child can have on this world. That's it for this special edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. It was great to have you with us. You can reach us anytime at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com. I look forward to seeing you here again next week. Life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.